You won't believe what I walked into that afternoon. And honestly, even now when I think about it, I feel my stomach twist in anger and heartbreak at the same time. Imagine coming home expecting to hear the laughter of your little girl filling the house, that sweet 7-year-old giggle that makes every worry seem smaller. But instead, the first sound that greets you is muffled crying, the kind of crying where a child tries to hide it, to be strong, but can't. I followed that sound into the living room, and my heart dropped so hard I swear it almost broke through my chest. There she was, my daughter sitting on the couch, her tiny hands covering her head, trembling shoulders, and wet cheeks that told me she had been crying for a long time. At first, I thought maybe she had gotten into scissors herself, maybe one of those little childhood accidents where kids experiment on their hair. But then I saw my sister standing there with a pair of clippers in her hand, smirking. I froze, because the scene didn't make sense. Why would she be holding clippers? Why was my daughter's long, shiny hair, the hair she loved brushing and braiding every night before bed, scattered in chunks all over the carpet like fallen leaves? I asked, my voice shaking. What did you do? And that's when my sister, with no guilt in her voice, no regret in her eyes, just pure cruelty, turned to me and said, "Now she really does look like that failure of a father." The words punched through me like a knife. I couldn't even process them at first, because all I saw was my little girl covering her bald head, ashamed, broken, and stripped of something she loved about herself. She was only 7, just 7 years old, and my own sister had done this to her not out of accident, not out of discipline, but out of spite, bitterness, and some twisted idea of making a point against me. In that moment, I felt every ounce of trust I had ever placed in my sister crumble into dust. My hand shook, not from weakness, but from the storm raging inside me. I wanted to scream. I wanted to protect my daughter. I wanted to undo what had just been done, but all I could do was kneel down, wrap my arms around her, and whisper, "It's okay, baby, I'm here." But the truth was, it wasn't okay. It would never be okay. And what happened next? The battles, the revelations, and the decisions I had to make changed the way I looked at family forever. When I finally gathered myself enough to speak, I demanded an explanation, though deep inside I already knew there was no justification that would make sense for what she had just done. My sister, arms crossed and chin held high like she had done something righteous, told me that my daughter was too spoiled, too proud of her looks, and needed to be humbled. But the worst part, the part that burned into my memory, was when she tilted her head slightly, narrowed her eyes at me, and repeated that cruel phrase again. "Now she looks just like her father." She meant it as an insult, not only to me but to my daughter, as if being compared to me was a curse. My heart ached, because I knew my daughter had overheard every single word, and a child at 7 is old enough to understand insults, to carry those scars deeper than anyone realizes. I looked into my daughter's eyes as she finally dropped her hands from her head, and what I saw there nearly shattered me: confusion, shame, and a question she didn't dare ask out loud. Why would someone who's supposed to love me do this to me? I scooped her into my arms and carried her upstairs, away from the toxic glare of my sister. My daughter's body felt so small, so fragile, pressed against me, and yet her silence screamed louder than any words. Upstairs, I sat her down gently on her bed, and as I ran my hand over her now bald head, I realized just how much had been taken from her in one cruel moment. It wasn't just hair, it was her sense of beauty, her innocence, her trust in family. Children don't understand the complexities of adult grudges. They only know love and cruelty. And right now, she had felt cruelty in its rawest form. I promised her we would get through this, that she was still the most beautiful girl in the world, that no haircut, no matter how brutal, could change that. She tried to smile, but her lips trembled, and the tears fell again. That's when I knew this wasn't just about comforting her for the moment. This was about making sure she would never feel unsafe, unprotected, or unloved again, especially not in her own home. Later that night, after she finally cried herself to sleep, I sat in the dark beside her bed and thought about everything that had led to this moment. My sister and I had always had a rocky relationship. She carried resentment toward me that went back years, back to childhood rivalries, jealousy, and the bitterness of choices we made as adults. But I never imagined she would take out that bitterness on my daughter. I never thought she would cross that sacred line. And what stung the most was the insult she used: failure of a father. She knew that was my deepest insecurity, something I had struggled with since the day my marriage fell apart, something I had worked so hard to overcome by being present, loving, and committed to my child. To hear it thrown in my face, in front of my daughter, as if my worth as a father could be mocked and belittled, that was the ultimate betrayal. I stayed awake for hours, thinking about how to handle this. Should I throw my sister out of my house that very night? Should I confront her, scream at her, until she realized the pain she had caused? Or should I take the quieter path, document what happened, and cut her out of our lives permanently? Anger burned in me, but beneath the anger was clarity. I needed to put my daughter first, always, and putting her first meant showing her that love always wins over cruelty, that no matter how badly someone tries to tear us down, we rise stronger. I resolved then and there that my sister would never have the power to hurt my little girl again. But I also knew this story wasn't ending here. This was just the beginning of a storm that would shake our family to its core. The next morning, when the sun came in through the curtains, I woke up with my daughter still curled beside me, her little head resting against my chest, and I felt both protective and powerless at the same time. I didn't want her to wake up and see herself in the mirror right away, not without me being there to hold her hand through it. But kids are curious and stronger than we give them credit for. Before I could stop her, she slipped out of bed and walked quietly to the bathroom. I followed, and there it was, the heartbreaking moment no parent should ever have to witness. She stood in front of the mirror staring at her reflection, her tiny fingers brushing over the bare skin where her long dark hair used to fall. Her lips quivered, her eyes filled with fresh tears, and then she whispered so faintly I almost missed it, "Daddy, I look ugly now." Those words tore through me worse than any insult my sister had thrown at me. Ugly, my daughter, the same girl whose smile could light up my darkest days, the same girl whose spirit was pure, kind, and brighter than anything. No, I couldn't let her believe that. I knelt down, hugged her tight, and told her, "You are beautiful, you are brave, and no haircut, no clippers, no cruel words can ever change that. Beauty is not in your hair, baby, it's in your heart." She nodded slowly, but I could see it in her eyes. The damage was already sinking in. A sip should not have to wrestle with concepts of shame and self-worth like this. But thanks to my sister's cruelty, she now had to. I decided right then that something had to change in our lives. Keeping my sister under the same roof was no longer an option. But it wasn't just about kicking her out. It was about making sure my daughter felt safe again, that she understood she was valued and loved beyond measure. I marched downstairs to confront my sister. She was in the kitchen sipping coffee like nothing had happened, like she hadn't just shattered a child's self-esteem. My hands clenched into fists at my sides, but I held myself back because I didn't want to show my daughter anger. I wanted to show her strength. "You need to leave," I told her, my voice steady but firm. She raised an eyebrow, smirked, and said, "Over a haircut, you're really that soft?" That smug tone, that dismissive attitude, it made my blood boil, but I refused to let her bait me. "No," I said, "over the fact that you hurt my daughter on purpose, over the fact that you insulted me in front of her, over the fact that you have no remorse." Her smirk faltered for just a second, and then she scoffed, muttered something under her breath, and slammed her mug on the counter. But I didn't care about her reaction anymore. I cared about my little girl upstairs, who deserved better than to live under the shadow of someone so toxic. Throwing my own sister out wasn't easy. Family ties run deep, and there's always that voice inside you that says, "But she's your blood." Yet at that moment, I realized something powerful. Blood doesn't give anyone the right to hurt the ones you love. Family isn't defined by shared DNA, it's defined by love, respect, and trust. And my sister had violated all three. She packed a bag while muttering insults under her breath, and when she walked out the door, I felt both relief and sadness. Relief that my daughter wouldn't have to face her cruelty anymore, but sadness because the person I once trusted, the sister I once thought I could rely on, had chosen jealousy and hate over family. As her car pulled away, I closed the door and locked it, whispering a silent promise to myself, never again. That afternoon, I tried to lift my daughter's spirits. We baked cookies together, we painted pictures, we even laughed a little, but I could still see the weight she carried. Every time she caught a glimpse of herself in the reflection of a window or a spoon, her shoulders slumped a little. It hurt to see, but it also fueled my determination. I started searching online for ways to make her feel beautiful again: scarves, hats, even fun little headbands that could bring her joy. I also thought about taking her to a children's salon that specialized in fun wig styling to give her some control back over her appearance. But more than any of that, I knew the real healing would come from love, patience, and reassurance. Over the next few days, I poured my heart into reminding her of her worth, reminding her that she was more than her hair, more than anyone's cruel words, and most importantly, more than her aunt's twisted attempt to make her feel less. What I didn't realize, though, was that this was only the surface of the storm. Word of what happened spread through our extended family, and soon enough, the drama, accusations, and hidden truths came flooding out, truths that would make me question everything I thought I knew about my sister, my past, and even my own role as a father. Within a few days, the whispers began. My phone started ringing, and family members who rarely reached out suddenly wanted to check in. At first, I thought maybe they were just concerned, but I quickly realized my sister had already gotten to them. She had twisted the story, painting herself as the victim, claiming I had overreacted, that it was just a haircut, and that I had thrown her out like trash. She conveniently left out the cruel words, the deliberate humiliation, the psychological wound she carved into my daughter's heart. It was infuriating. Relatives who hadn't been around to witness my daughter's tears felt entitled to pass judgment, telling me I should apologize to my sister, that family comes first. But I kept asking myself, what kind of family cuts down a child to get back at her father? Every time someone suggested I make peace, I thought about the night I held my daughter while she cried herself to sleep, and the answer became clearer. Protecting her was more important than protecting anyone's fragile idea of family unity. Still, the pressure built. My mother, who has always tried to play peacemaker between us, called me with a voice full of disappointment. "She's your sister," she said. "You can't just shut her out." She was probably trying to teach the girl a lesson. That sentence made my blood run cold. A lesson? What lesson is there in stripping a child of her dignity? What lesson is there in mocking a 7-year-old about her father? I felt a surge of frustration, because it wasn't just about the haircut, it was about the message. My daughter now thought her beauty could be taken from her at any moment, that her worth was tied to her appearance, and worst of all, that her father was a failure. That's not a lesson, it's a trauma. For the first time, I found myself raising my voice at my mother, telling her, in no uncertain terms, that if she couldn't see the cruelty in what my sister had done, then maybe she didn't deserve to be around my daughter either. It hurt to say, but the truth needed to be spoken. Love isn't proven by turning a blind eye to abuse. It's proven by standing against it. Meanwhile, my daughter's school began noticing the change. She had always been cheerful, social, the kind of kid who drew other kids in with her energy. But now, she was quieter. She wore hats and scarves every day, even indoors, and when other children asked why, she would shrink back, avoiding the question. Her teacher pulled me aside one afternoon and gently asked if everything was okay at home. That moment was a dagger, because as much as I wanted to protect my daughter, the truth was seeping through the cracks. I explained briefly what had happened, careful not to overwhelm with details, and the teacher's face fell with sadness. She offered support, even suggested a school counselor who could help my daughter process what she was going through. At first, I felt ashamed that my own family had caused so much damage, that my child now needed therapy, but then I realized there was no shame in seeking help. If anything, it was a step toward healing. I agreed, and soon my daughter had someone she could talk to, someone who reminded her she wasn't alone, that what happened wasn't her fault. At home, I doubled down on my mission to rebuild her confidence. We started little rituals every morning before school. We stood in front of the mirror together, and I would make her list 3 things she loved about herself that had nothing to do with looks. "I'm kind," she would whisper. "I'm funny. I'm good at drawing." And I would add my own affirmations about her. "You're brave. You're smart. You're the best part of my life." Slowly, I began to see a spark returning in her eyes, though the scars were still there. But while I was pouring myself into healing my daughter, my sister was busy spreading poison. She began telling people that I was manipulating the situation to make her look bad, that I was using my daughter's little haircut to paint myself as some sort of martyr dad. The lies cut deep, but not as deep as what I would soon uncover. Real reason she hated me so much, the reason she lashed out in such a cruel way. It wasn't just about jealousy or sibling rivalry. It was about a secret buried in our family's past, one I had never known until it came crashing into my life like a tidal wave. And when the truth came out, it didn't just change how I saw my sister, it changed how I saw my entire family, and even myself as a father. The truth revealed itself in pieces, like shards of glass that cut deeper the more I tried to piece them together. One night, after a long day of balancing work, school runs, and trying to keep my daughter's spirits high, I got a message from my cousin, someone I hadn't spoken to in months. It simply read, "You know she's never forgiven you for what happened with Dad, right?" At first, I was confused. What did my father have to do with any of this? But as I pressed for details, my cousin hesitated, then finally told me something that made my blood run cold. Apparently, years ago, long before I became a father myself, our dad had confided in my sister things he never told me. He had criticized me harshly, calling me weak, irresponsible, and destined to fail. Words that mirrored exactly what my sister had spat at me in the living room. It was like she had inherited his bitterness and made it her mission to carry his opinion forward, to brand me as the failure son, while putting herself on a pedestal as the responsible one. Suddenly, it all clicked: her resentment, her mocking, even the way she went after my daughter. It wasn't just about jealousy, it was about legacy. She was carrying our father's cruel judgment like a badge of honor, and by shaving my daughter's head, by saying she looked like her failure father, she was cementing that generational insult into the next generation. I felt sick. I never had the best relationship with my father, but I had worked tirelessly to rise above his criticisms. I built a life where my daughter was my world, where love was my compass. And now, to learn that my sister was weaponizing his words, turning them into tools to hurt an innocent child, it enraged me. But more than that, it broke my heart, because I realized she wasn't just trying to tear me down. She was trying to make sure my daughter grew up doubting me too. That night, I sat with my daughter while she colored in her sketchbook, and I couldn't stop looking at her, couldn't stop thinking about how fragile trust is. A child's love for their parent is pure, but it can be poisoned if the wrong words are planted at the wrong time. I refused to let that happen. I swore silently to myself that no matter what my father or my sister thought of me, I would not let their bitterness seep into my little girl's life. She deserved better. But the storm didn't stop there. The more I stood my ground against my sister's manipulation, the more aggressive she became. She started showing up uninvited at family gatherings, glaring at me across the room, whispering to anyone who would listen. At one point, she even confronted me in front of others, saying I was raising my daughter to be vain, and that I was too soft to discipline her properly. I wanted to scream, to tell the whole room what she had done, but I realized there was no point in shouting over someone determined to twist the narrative. Instead, I walked out with my daughter's hand in mine, showing her by example that dignity sometimes means choosing silence over chaos. Later, as we drove home, she asked me quietly, "Daddy, why doesn't Auntie like us?" The question stung more than I can describe. How do you explain to a child that sometimes family isn't kind, that sometimes the people who should love you most are the ones who hurt you worst? I squeezed her hand and told her, it's not that she doesn't like us, it's that she doesn't understand love the way we do. In the weeks that followed, I poured everything into creating a safe space for my daughter. We redecorated her room together, filling it with her favorite colors, drawings, and little lights that made her smile. I arranged a special Princess Day for her, where she picked out clothes and accessories that made her feel strong and beautiful. Every evening, before bed, I reminded her that being bald didn't make her less it, made her braver, because she was still standing tall even after someone tried to tear her down. Slowly, I began to see her confidence return, though I knew the journey was far from over. Meanwhile, my relationship with the rest of the family fractured. Some stood by me, understanding that what my sister had done was cruel and unacceptable. Others accused me of being dramatic, of holding a grudge, but I no longer cared about their approval. My focus was clear: my daughter. If protecting her meant standing alone, then so be it. And yet, I couldn't shake the gnawing feeling that there was more to uncover, that my sister's cruelty was only the tip of a deeper wound in our family. And sure enough, just when I thought the dust had begun to settle, a confrontation arose that forced everything into the open: one final showdown that would either break us forever or set us free. The final confrontation came sooner than I expected. At a family gathering meant to celebrate my niece's birthday, I debated not going at all, knowing my sister would be there, but my daughter wanted to go, and I didn't want her to miss out on being with her cousins just because of adult conflicts. So, I swallowed my dread and went. The party started out, normal kids running around, balloons everywhere, laughter filling the air, but underneath it all was a tension I could feel like static in the room. My sister avoided me at first, then circled closer, watching me with that same smirk I had come to know too well. Eventually, she couldn't resist. She cornered me near the kitchen, lowered her voice just enough for others not to hear, and hissed, "You think you're some kind of hero, Dad. You're still a failure. And now, everyone sees it." Something inside me snapped, not in anger, but in resolve. I looked her dead in the eye and, for the first time, I didn't argue, I didn't defend, I didn't try to explain. I simply said, "No. The only failure here is someone who hurts a child out of spite." Then I turned and walked away, not giving her the satisfaction of a fight. But fate had other plans. My daughter, who had overheard more than I realized, walked right up to her aunt with a strength that startled me. In her small but steady voice, she said, "You didn't make me ugly. You just made yourself mean." The room fell silent. My sister's face went pale, her mouth opening and closing like she couldn't believe a 7-year-old had stood up to her. In that moment, I felt a surge of pride unlike anything before. My daughter, the same little girl who had cried herself to sleep just weeks earlier, had found her voice. She wasn't broken, she was brave. I pulled her into my arms, kissed her head, and whispered, "That's my girl." My sister tried to recover, tried to laugh it off, but the truth was out, and everyone in the room saw it. The mask had slipped. She wasn't the victim. She was the bully. And for the first time, she looked small, powerless, and exposed. After that day, everything changed. My sister and I stopped speaking entirely, and while that decision weighed heavily on the family, it also brought me peace. I realized that sometimes the best way to protect your child is to cut out the poison, even if that poison comes in the form of family. My daughter, meanwhile, grew stronger every day. Her hair began to grow back, but by then it almost didn't matter. She had learned that her worth was not tied to her looks, but to her courage, her kindness, and her resilience. She started drawing herself bald in her pictures, but with a crown on her head, smiling wide. And when I asked her why, she said, "Because princesses can be brave too." That answer melted me. She wasn't just healing, she was transforming pain into strength. Looking back, I realized the cruelty that day could have defined her, could have scarred her forever. But instead, it became the fire that forged her into someone even stronger. As for me, I learned that fatherhood isn't about being perfect, it's about showing up, protecting, and standing tall, even when the world tries to tear you down. My sister tried to use my daughter as a weapon to carry forward my father's judgment, but in the end, all she did was reveal the truth. Love is stronger than bitterness, and while she may never admit her fault, it no longer matters. What matters is the little girl who walks into her school now, with her head held high, who laughs again without fear, who knows deep in her bones that her daddy will always fight for her, no matter what. And every time I look at her, I remind myself of the promise I made that first night: never again. Never again will anyone make her feel small. Never again will anyone take her light away, because she is my daughter, and she is unstoppable.